Let's begin by queering up the USA view. In Queer American History, Abraham Lincoln writes poem, "But Billy has married a boy." In 1829, Abraham Lincoln wrote a poem about gay marriage. Yeah, you heard correctly. A decade ago, the Washington Blade published a piece in which Mark Segal told why he thought the dismissal by most historians that Lincoln might have been gay was unconvincing to him. Segal is the founder and publisher of Philadelphia Gay News, the country's oldest LGBTQ+ news weekly. He mentioned a poem from 1829 written about a boy marrying a boy. The creator of this poem was a 20-year-old man in rural Indiana, and his name was Abraham Lincoln. This poem is thought to be the first reference to gay marriage in U.S. history. Most historians agree that Lincoln wrote the poem as a joke or a rebuttal to the lack of an invitation to a friend's wedding. But how a backwoodsman conceived a boy marries a boy poem in 1829 remains a big question. The poem was included in the first major biography of Lincoln, written by his law partner, William Herndon. Revisionists omitted it in subsequent editions. It didn't reappear in Herndon's edition until the 1940s. The poem starts like this, quote, "I will tell you a joke about Jewel and Mary. It is neither a joke nor a story. For Reuben and Charles have married 2 girls, but Billy has married a boy," end quote. I feel like, all right, so I have thoughts on this, and I'm a historian. That's what I do, and like, this isn't gay marriage. This is not.
I agree. I think it's a stretch.
It's a little bit of a stretch. But I do think there's something that is like, and to be fair, something similar to same-sex unions has existed, and like the Catholic Church used to condone them, like actually used to even back in the medieval ages. Like, so this is not, but part of the thing about sexuality and gender is so much of it is constructed, right? So that it's like they change over time. Ideas of marriage have changed over time. Gay people didn't see themselves as gay people until very recently. Like that is like, you didn't like revolve your life around, same-sex attractions, right?
Right. Giving it a name, giving it a culture. And although I have to say that as both a poet and a gay man, I am honored to think that in some small way, I may have something in common with one of the country's most beloved presidents.
Oh, now you made me feel bad.
Sounds woke.
I think
Sounds
it's
woke.
really incredible that this, dates back to 1829.
Yeah.
Almost 200 years ago.
It stands out to me the most, and the fact that they were talking about this back then, which goes to show that, this isn't something that's brought on to people or persuaded or something like that.
That's a good point.
I mean, I have some thoughts on the whole, like, Abraham Lincoln could have been gay. Like, I don't really like that line of stuff because you'll never know and you can't really, go back and, assign somebody a sexuality based on things.
But meanwhile,
allegedly
there were gay presidents. I don't know which one it was.
Allegedly.
But, well, there was one president that was routinely referred to as Aunt Fancy.
And the Bachelor. And the thing about, people have been obsessed about Abraham Lincoln's sexuality for decades. And if you've even seen that awful movie, what was that awful movie with Bros?
It was awful.
It was, and I'm sorry. This is not opinion, it's just fact.
I'm done with movies like that. I'm sorry.
There was even a small plot or a small subplot or something about Abraham Lincoln being gay, and they're like, oh, and you want to put him back in the closet, and I was like, this is somehow made the movie worse. I don't it somehow it managed.
So let me take a different tack. If it's true, and I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but I have a problem with the fact that it got erased, because that's oftentimes the first step to erasing us, is erasing, we don't know if he was gay, he might have been bi, he could have just been an ally. Who knows? We're never going to know.
I mean, unless you dig him up and ask him, then
I don't know that I would dig up Zombie Lincoln.
And I just, my issue is I don't like when people he said he was heterosexual. I'm sure Abraham Lincoln made that known. The whole assuming or like saying somebody might have been, I think does more harm to our community than anything.
Married to a man, lots of children.
He could have
Of course,
been.
that hasn't stopped,
Might have been.
doesn't mean anything, yeah.
Well, that's also as historians, when we are trying to show that someone was gay over time, the burden of proof is so high. Like, you're like, how do you know the X, Y, or Z? When that's not true for straight people, right? Like, you don't have to be like, prove that this person's straight. You're just like, it's always just kind of assumed. That's always like the default sexuality. But also, like even if he had same-sex attractions, he wouldn't have understood himself in that same way, which is not, it's important as in history for us to understand that things change over time, right? Like that, including the way we see ourselves, and that communities grew and built out of our desires and our, ability to, be a community.
But I will say it's important to remember that at the same time that he was alive, Walt Whitman was alive.
Yeah. And certainly
and there was no question.
You're right, well said.
Walt
In 200 years, don't go back and be like, was Elijah Manley actually straight? He was actually straight.
So set the record straight, Elijah.
That's right.
I was not straight. I was a homosexual man my entire life.
You heard it first here.
That's right.
It's coming out.
You have the receipts, I think.
That's right.
We are Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only live daily LGBTQ+ evening news show, brought to you from Happening Out Television Network. We operate in the same model of PBS and NPR, but for the LGBTQ+ community. We educate, inform, and entertain by supporting the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ+ community, with more than 100,000 a week watching us on Roku, Apple Television, and other channels. To keep the story going, we accept donations with 100% transparency. Stay updated and live authentically with Queer News Tonight.